Today we talk about the third chapter in my book, Develop a Light Heart. I'm Marco Perri. Welcome to the Perri platform. Okay, so here we are today talking about the third chapter in my book, Attaining Fulfillment, 8 Pillars to Live By. The previous 2 episodes talked about the first 2, and now we're on the third. It's titled Developing a Light Heart. Now, this pillar really is rooted in Buddhist doctrine. One of their fundamental teachings is that existence is paired with suffering. Being a human means that at some point you're going to encounter it. It's just a universal across all of us. Now, you may ask yourself this, well, where does suffering come from and why is it universal? Buddhists would say it arises from 2 sources that we all can relate to: attachment and desire. It's very hard for you to find a human without 1 or 2 of those traits. Now, attachment and desire have similarities, but they are quite different. Attachment is you liking something, basically, growing closer to it. You can be attached to your family, to your pet, to your career. Essentially, you can run this test to see if you're attached to something. Do you want to lose it? If the answer is no, or rather, would you be indifferent to losing it? If you were to lose your job, would you not care? If the answer is yes, well, you're not attached to it. But if you would, then you do care. And there are various reasons to be attached to something. Maybe it's because you've become accustomed to it. Maybe you need it, in the case of the job, to provide for your family. Or maybe you love it, like in the case of a spouse. Either way, it's something that you wouldn't be too happy about parting with. Pretty much every person in this world, unless you are the Stoic king, can relate to that feeling. Now, desire is essentially a vision for the future. Something that you want, that you have a craving for. Something that you want to manifest in reality. Maybe you desire to have a family one day, or to have a great career, to write a book, to become an actor. Whatever it is, your desire is highly correlated actually to goals in your life, whatever your mission kind of is. In some sense, I would say that attachment is fundamentally rooted in the here and now, what you currently have, and desire is based on projections for the future, what you could have. And these 2 things lead to suffering. They're double-edged swords because if you are attached to something, you care if you lose it. And in life, it's very common that you will lose things. And with desire, you want something, you envision it. You're trying to move towards it. If things change and that doesn't pan out exactly as you imagine, that's going to be painful because you realize there is a shortcoming in your plan, whether that's your fault or the environment or whatever. Things didn't turn out the way you expected. That can be very crushing. Virtually all suffering can be pinned to one of these 2 things here. If you experience a death, well, you had attachment to that person and now it's going to hurt you. If you experience a setback in life, it's because you had some type of plan, a vision, or a desire, and it hasn't come to fruition. So, what do the Buddhists say? The teachings of that religion lay out that to rid yourself of suffering, you have to remove attachment and desire from your life. These 2 things produce it, so getting rid of it will get rid or mitigate suffering to a massive degree. It tells you to just view things from a Stoic perspective and not to care too much, basically. To just go with the flow. It poses the question, why would you cultivate attachment if, given the finite nature of reality, it's very likely that you're going to lose that thing? And the pain that ensues is going to be very powerful. Why bother with creating a vision or a certain desire for the future when we know that life is unpredictable? It's actually very hard for a particular plan to manifest because it can only really happen in one way, if we're basing it on the way you're envisioning it, where failure can be defined in many different types of ways. One thing going wrong in your plan could be a failure. There's probably 1,000 things that have to go correctly for it to occur the way you want it to. Given these questions here, they seem to come to the conclusion that, hey, it's better to limit your attachment. You probably will still feel it just because you're human, but try to get rid of that. Especially the excess. You don't want to be too attached to anything because it'll hurt you at some point. Don't really worry too much about desire. Go with the flow. Life will give you what it gives you, and just accept that. Stop trying to play too much of an active role in shaping that reality. Now, my opinion. I believe the Buddhists are onto something here. First of all, it's very true, the first part, that Suffering is paired with existence. Just the simple fact that you are human means that at some point in your life you're going to be hit with tremendous suffering. That's how things go. That is the cost for playing the game. Now, the recommendation. I believe what they're saying is true. If you are somehow able to rid yourself of attachment and desire, it's very likely that you wouldn't suffer anymore, because you simply wouldn't care. Of course, there would be your personal suffering, like if you were to get shot or stabbed or something, you would feel pain, but suffering related to other things, which we could argue is more potent, that would largely be gone, because other things just don't have that same gravity anymore. Now, I've acknowledged that it's true, but at the same time, I don't agree with it, especially as a formula for living. First of all, it's not fulfilling, and I don't think it's the best way to go about creating a meaningful existence. I use this analogy in the book. Let's say there's something you don't like flossing. It's unpleasant. Wouldn't we be all better off if we didn't have to floss anymore? Well, here's one possible answer. You just chop your head off. You don't have to floss anymore. You solve the problem. Well, it seems like you're losing a lot more than simply the ability to never floss again. You're losing your brain, your mouth, the ability to speak, the ability to think, the ability to live. And a very similar thing happens when you cut out attachment and desire. You're not just losing the ability to suffer. You're losing the very essence of being human, of being able to tap into potential, to create meaningful relationships, to experience love, to move towards a goal. You better think twice before you make that bargain. And on top of all of that, I feel like it's just contrary to human nature. How can we even establish this properly? To not feel attachment is to not care. How can you not be attached to your family or your loved one or your children or your pet? How can you not feel the pangs of sorrow when something happens to them? To have no desire is to have no aim. How can you realistically move through life like that? The answer is you actually don't move. The world just moves around you and you observe it. It's kind of like you're in a car in the back seat. You aren't really moving. The vehicle is moving you in whatever direction you want to go, and life is the driver. I'm saying, though, isn't it wiser to put yourself in the driver's seat? To really be dictating the ways in which you're navigating through your existence. Now, of course, that comes with a responsibility. If you crash your car, that's on you. But if you're just a passenger in the back, you can say, hey, it wasn't my fault that we crashed. I was just going with the flow. The driver, in this case it'd be life, just decided to mess me up. Therefore, I don't have to worry about it because I wasn't trying to go to New York. Maybe me crashing into this rock here was part of the plan. It's an easy way out. This line of thinking essentially boils down to saying you'll probably lose the game, so why even play? You're probably going to lose the things you cherish most, so why cherish anything? Your plan likely won't play out exactly as you imagine, so why have a plan in the first place? My response to that is, well, because first of all, in regards to your plan, you can always pivot. It's good to have a vision because it guides you. To have a worthwhile desire will illuminate a path forward for you. Now, of course, things will happen in life where you may end up at point B, try to get to point A, but that could be okay. What is point B? Could you make it better? Could you move yourself closer towards point A along the way? Could you find new ways to find meaning in your new location? And the second thing they say, why even bother with attachment when you'll likely lose those things? Well, that's the game of life. You will lose the things you cherish most at some point, either because they pass before you or you pass and then you lose the ability to have anything. But by that same analogy, what actually matters when you get to the end of your journey? Are you going to look back and say, hey, I avoided all of this suffering, therefore it was a good life? I don't think so. Nobody on their deathbed says, hey, I didn't lose this person or that person, therefore it was amazing. They instead will value their life based on what they've done with people and for the world, based on potential they've captured. See, we don't quantify success or our own personal success in terms of avoidance. We quantify it based on what we get, what we go out there and take, whether it's building a good family, having a good relationship with X, Y, and Z people, having an impact in the world. These things come from attachment. If you're trying to fight a cause or try to fight for a cause you believe in, you're attached to the cause. If you're trying to do something to help a community, you are attached to the community. That's the basic fact here. Now, you may be hurt along the way. The person could leave you. Something could happen to them. And that's a potent message too. When something you care about suffers, you suffer as well as a byproduct of that. So the more things in your life that you care about, the more opportunity there is for you to be hurt. But at the same time, there is more potential to capture. It's a double-edged sword. You do not want to be giving up all of that potential just to avoid a loss, because here's the fact of it. Mathematically, given your position, whatever it is, you can actually only lose up to 100% of it. If you have 100 units of whatever it is, happiness, positivity, not caring, you can lose all of that. You can go to 0. You have no more units of happiness, and that's just your existence. But when you think about it in terms of potential, how much you can gain, the numbers are staggering here. You can gain 100%, or 200, or 300, or 400. There actually is no limit. You can keep going up and up and up. There is no ceiling here when it comes to cultivating potential and finding attachments with people. You really can have as many as you want. You can capture as much as you need to. The only limit here is yourself, and it doesn't seem like a fair bargain to me to hedge against a 100% loss by sacrificing 1,000, 10,000, basically infinity percent amount of gains. You shouldn't be doing that trade. What's going to happen is you will stagnate at whatever position you're at. If you are X% happy, X% fulfilled, that's it. You called it quits and you're going to remain there, while your peers around you are going to live life, gather experience, develop bonds with people, find meaning in relationships, and they're going to grow and grow and grow. And at the end of the day, you're going to look back at that and say, hey, I didn't suffer, but I also never had the thrill and the pleasure and the growth associated with living. That's no way to go about this journey. Now, let's say, despite my objections, you still wanted to try. I don't even think there's very many people out there who can achieve this preposterous goal. It's just not a compatible framework with the human soul. To rid yourself of attachment, how? To never love things that are in your life, things that you've grown with? Explain to me what process you can go through to achieve that. And is it a process that doesn't destroy the human psyche? That doesn't get rid of certain parts of you that you should be treasuring? And to get rid of desire, how so? To never dream? It's funny too, because it's self-contradictory. While you are pursuing that level of thinking to no longer be attached to whatever, you actually have a desire embedded there. Your new desire is to be stoic, to not care. You simply have a desire. You're not going with the waves here. You're still in control somewhat and moving towards something. This is just not anything that can be established properly. At least not in the absolute sense. You can get semblance of it here and there, but still, I don't think it's the best way to go about dealing with the reality of suffering. Now, the most tragic thing here is that I can actually see why these ideas might be attractive to certain people. Let's say that you have been hurt before, that you have experienced suffering because of an attachment or a desire. Not putting yourself in harm's way sounds very appealing, I'm sure, especially if you don't want to relive the horrors of the past. Like, let's say you had a loved one who betrayed you. Now, you're going to give up because you don't want to deal with that again. You don't want to be emotionally toyed with and put at the mercy of another individual, but you lose either way here. You might not get hurt, but you're going to lose some semblance of fulfillment, of not being able to pursue a meaningful relationship. You are safe in your bubble, sure, but you can't love freely anymore because of the restrictions you've imposed upon yourself. That's not a fair bargain again. It's what makes life beautiful. To have these risks associated with certain actions and to face them bravely is honorable. To run away because you feel like the odds of you getting hurt again are evident, well, that's something cowardly. And it's not going to lead you down a path that you're going to be proud of, because especially if it's something you really want, you have to put your chin up, your shoulders back and your chest up, and you gotta face that. These are the horrors of life that are not unique to your story. Everyone has to deal with it. Everyone's got to consider it. If these goals were easy to attain and there was no risk and anyone could just get it by scratching their head and there was no work that was required, there was no thinking that was needed to actually make a plan that would succeed, well, there wouldn't be much worth in that pursuit. Instead, you have the opportunity here to be brave. Capture that. I will caution though that you have to temper what I'm saying with intelligence. Don't needlessly put yourself in situations where you will be hurt. If you aren't learning from your past mistakes, like let's say the person who betrayed you, if that happened to you, was displaying behaviors that were suspicious or you knew was leading somewhere, but you ignored it, and you're going to ignore them again in the next partner, well, that's just you being kind of foolish. You have to adapt. You got to make a better plan here. Don't put yourself in harm's way for the thrill of it. Try to reach your goal in a smart method. Learn, take advice, seek out help. There are lots of things you can do here to reap the benefits while mitigating the risk associated with the mission. So now we've established that to get rid of suffering, it's really rooted in killing desire and attachment, but desire and attachment are more like double-edged swords. They don't just produce suffering, they produce meaning as well. They have purposes aside from hurting you. They are deeply human. This recipe or solution that was put forward by Buddhism calls for the removal of parts of the human fabric to be supposedly free from pain. That hints at a very interesting finding, that since these things are so deeply human, suffering is a universal among us all. Everyone can relate to it. Everyone is destined to encounter it in some form or another if they live long enough, either directly or indirectly. The odds that you are in a position where you're not suffering and the people around you aren't suffering, that's something of a miracle, and it definitely won't last very long. Where I differ from Buddhism, though, is not in the interpretation of suffering being universal, it's in what we should do about it. I don't think we should be seeking the complete removal of it. I think we should be mitigating for it, trying to differentiate between suffering that's worth recognizing and ones that can be let go, but not sacrificing attachment and desire at the same time to reach that goal. We need a more practical way to handle pain, and I've tried to put something together for that. So this chapter really is handling things that are more minor. The next chapter, Bouncing Back, I talk about the suffering that has to be recognized because it's so powerful. Even if you use the tenet of developing a light heart, you'll probably still be squashed by the amount of pain that comes with the topics in the next chapter. But for this one, we're talking about things that aren't world-shattering, but they still get the better of us at some points, like having your car get damaged or someone bumping into you, things like that. You'd be surprised by how much sorrow they can cause in the moment. And you can recognize that by the way it makes you behave. You can be put in a very bad mood from something very small, and you'll take that bad mood and take it out on the people around you, causing even more trauma and more problems, and those people will spread it further. It's something like a contagion. So as I've laid out, my recommendation for these lesser sorrows to stop them before they even get to that point is to develop a light heart. A light heart is synonymous with being able to deflect the lesser hardships of life, to continue walking freely down your path without letting your headspace be clouded. Because we all know how easy that is, to let a minor thing take over your entire purview. You don't want to be bogged down by inconveniences, annoyances, or bothers, because those are all forms of suffering that can be avoided and mitigated. And getting rid of them just means more peace in your life. A heavy heart is just the opposite. Everything bogs you down. You have so much baggage within you that small things just tear you up. They destroy your world. And as a result, the people around you in your orbit are going to feel that. You will create a toxic environment where those around you also get a heavy heart. And now, it's very hard for you to mitigate and traverse through the horrors of life because everything is tearing you apart. Everything is a monumental hardship because you are viewing it in that manner. Mainly because your view is being impacted by all the things you're keeping inside of you, by all of the presuppositions that you are not letting go of. Of course, developing a light heart is easier said than done. Remember, even in your own personal experiences, times of minor annoyances in your life, that's a good place to start to see where the issue might be. It's likely those small things ballooned into massive impediments that consumed your entire mind for a period. Maybe when someone cut you off on the road, and that's all you could think about. And it made you furious, it made you ready to inflict pain upon them. You thought about cutting them off now. And maybe it made you inflict pain upon those in your own vehicle because you were so frustrated and them doing something that annoyed you was more impactful now. It made you ready to snap. Maybe you had a bad day, or maybe you're carrying around all that baggage we talked about from other situations, but We are very prone to overreacting. That's the fundamental conclusion here. If that's how we respond to things that really don't matter that much, just imagine how uncalibrated our responses are for serious matters. A light heart really is a form of translation mechanism. It takes whatever is happening before you, the events that are unfolding, and it helps you better decide how to interpret them. The first thing you should do is ask yourself, in the grand scheme of things, does it matter? Zoom out. It's very easy to get focused into something, but look at the big picture here. Is wrath warranted? Or would everyone here be better off if you just danced along? You ignored it. Now, maybe there are cases where you do have to react, like if your safety is put in danger, there's an imminent threat in front of you. Of course, I'm not saying everything has to be avoided, but you have to think about it. Apply your mind. You may be surprised by how many instances are better left alone. If the event will have been forgotten by nightfall, that's usually a key indicator that it isn't worth fretting over. Now, one thing we should also try to do is to assume the best in people until proven otherwise. Maybe the driver who cut you off was late for a very important job interview that they needed to secure employment to provide for their family. Or maybe their wife was in the car and she was giving birth and they had to rush to the hospital. We don't know what the truth is in the situation, but we are likely drawn to attribute the worst motivations possible to these people. That they are evil, that they want to cut us off, that they're trying to ruin our day. For some reason, that's how we typically rationalize the encounter. Oddly enough though, when we're the ones who are cutting people off, we always have an excuse to justify it to ourselves. We're giving ourselves the benefit of the doubt. We have to go here, we're late picking up our sibling, they'll be okay if they get cut off, it's not the end of the world. That's why we can do it without much regret. If we can extend this charity to other people, we will all be much better off. Can you really be mad at the driver who is rushing to get a loved one to the hospital? Of course, we will truly never know what's going on here, what motivations are at play, but do yourself this favor of making it easier to move on. And I will temper that also with the second part. Until proven otherwise, if someone's doing something reckless like cutting you off and they're braking, trying to get you to crash into them, of course it's an issue here. They're displaying a malevolent attitude. They're showing an intent to mess with you and to put everyone's safety in danger. But if they're not giving you a reason to doubt what they're doing, why are we jumping to the worst case? And I find this very common in just regular interactions between people these days. Everyone seems to be very keen on getting offended. Everyone is seeking an opportunity to own somebody, to destroy someone, to cuss someone out, to shame them, to get a video on social media to embarrass them. It's very counterproductive to living in a fulfilling society for everyone. It's actually quite a reversal to these odd behaviors that I seem to see popping up more and more often today. Getting triggered at something that was not meant to trigger you, being offended at something that was never meant to offend you, finding things to get angry about, actively seeking them out, assuming the worst in other people. That seems to be a pattern that's becoming more prevalent and we have to stop it. That's not synonymous with developing a light heart. It's the opposite. Those people have heavy hearts and we can see that. If you have somehow convinced yourself that everything out here is meant to hurt you, people are really that malevolent, you're going to start believing it. And it's going to impart itself on your worldview. That's going to be a problem for everyone, especially when it's not synced up with reality. Now, the fundamental message here is that without good cause for suspicion, we must remember that we are dealing with flawed creatures. We all share this existence and nobody has understood what it means. It's ripe with suffering. We waste time quibbling over trivial matters while the important facts of life escape us. When something isn't meant to hurt you, when something happens accidentally, when people harm you unwittingly, we need a light heart to move beyond that. Otherwise, we trap ourselves within the numerous misfortunes of living. We are destined to encounter them, so we must understand how to react because that's under our volition. We may even feel justifiably wronged in some cases, but the ways we respond, that's our choice. That is our semblance of decision making, and it will ripple throughout not only our words, but our responses going forward. It's how we make a change. So let's just briefly go through an example of how we can begin to develop this mindset of having a light heart. Let's just use the driver cutting you off again as an example. Action is the first thing to analyze because usually it happens automatically. So someone cuts you off and you instantly get mad, or you honk, or you cuss out the window, or you take your anger out on someone else in your vehicle. Use your mind when that's happening. Ask yourself, is it worth it? Does it matter? Usually the answer is no. Then, after you've controlled your action response, try to see the motivations at play here. Was the other person really trying to harm you, or were they just caught up in their own world? Unless you have a good reason to doubt them, charity is called for. You can see that cutting someone off is foolish, but the extra anger isn't called for right now. You can recognize the irresponsibility without losing your mind. Then, you can begin working backwards to the emotional root. Why did this get you so upset to begin with? Is it because you feel like someone's passing you in life? Is it because you don't like other people seemingly taking advantage of you? These responses come from somewhere. You're not getting that triggered for no reason. There is likely these unresolved issues within you, baggage, so to speak, that's bogging you down. You have to find a way of dealing with that, of unfurling it, of getting rid of the things that no longer have to be there. There are often these very deep presuppositions about the world within us that produce our reactions, and usually they're very angry. We have to alter and mitigate them. The real goal is for calmness to be the automatic response here, so back to phase 1, the action. When something happens, you really don't want to do much. You just want to sit down, analyze things, and approach it from a logical standpoint. We don't want to be emotionally hijacked with each issue we encounter. Going through this whole process every time, the thought process, is kind of tedious. We don't need to do that. With practice and attention, you can change the way your mind unconsciously reacts, and it's a worthwhile goal. Now, personally, I came to understand this pillar when I was evaluating my own situations. I started to ask myself, was what I was doing really worth it? Did it make sense to get exceptionally mad at someone for violating something I deemed to be a moral code when to them it wasn't? Like not letting me off the elevator before they come in. If someone doesn't know what they're doing, and that was often the case, someone will be walking in because they don't understand the rules there for some reason or another. Why are you getting angry with that? It's really just ignorance on their part, or maybe uncompassion on yours. And the way you feel in that moment is going to rapidly alter the dynamics of your other encounters going forward. So that one thing could have made you exceptionally ticked off. Now you're more likely to snap at something coming down the line. If that first thing never happened, you may have been more willing to accept maybe someone spilling something on your shoe or stepping on it in the mall. But because you already have things building up, you're more likely to snap and cause a problem. That's not good. And sometimes you let these encounters just play in your mind nonstop. So something has happened here and you keep thinking about it and it's distracting you from other things. And I started to ask myself, would I have been better off by letting that go an hour before? Probably, yeah. I could have been focusing on this and this and that and have regained control over my mind. How about 2 hours before? How about 12? How about a day? What if you could have let go of that thing a week ago or a month ago? Or how about not even letting it take hold of you in the first place? These are all worthwhile, and you can see the timeline. You want to move further and further back to the root. Letting things go as soon as possible, and maybe one day not even having something to let go, because automatically you didn't even capture it. It no longer becomes baggage in your heart. We live in these toxic times now, and I feel like it's just compounding the issue. We have to really sit down and analyze what's going on here, not letting the automatic anger responses take hold of us, because if we can't find a way to control that, we're going to create a more and more bloodthirsty environment that nobody can realistically succeed in. At the same time, we're not doing ourselves any favors either, so it's just bad all around. So that encapsulates my thoughts on this chapter, and as I mentioned before, next week's talk about the 4th chapter talks about suffering that's a little bit more potent. So this talk-worthy things that we can figure out really don't matter too much, things that we should be letting go automatically to free ourselves of the change that tie us down and keep us enraged. We don't need that. Next week, though, we talk about the things that really do matter, like massive losses, you just having your career destroyed, having someone very ill in your family, someone passing away. Things like this, things that no matter how light your heart is, you will be bogged down by them. How can we efficiently navigate through that? What are the steps that we can take to make sure we don't get completely destroyed and we don't remain in a state of abject depression? That's going to be the conversation that we have next time. So, without further ado, that brings us to the end of our talk for today. If you enjoy the content, be sure to leave a review and share. And I will remind you that my book, Attaining Fulfillment, 8 Pillars to Live By, is free everywhere. You can get it on Amazon, Apple, Google, any place that sells ebooks. And if you can't get it from there, for whatever reason, feel free to contact me and I'll make sure you get a copy. You can also find me online on my website, perriplatform.org, and on social media at Perri Platform. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you soon.